This might sound crazy, but I think the most popular games of today are inspired by a crusty, dusty old book. That book, Frank Herbert's 1966 science fiction novel, Dune. From the printed page to the world's largest MMO, how did we get here? Alright, who here is not familiar with Dune? Crash course time. The entire universe is run by a galactic empire. How they do it? I'm pretty sure it was this guy that did it. I'm just kidding, they folded space and time. How did they do that? By using a drug called spice, aka spice melange. The empire is made up of a bunch of different houses, and those guys compete against each other for the right to collect the spice. Winning that contract's a big deal because the spice can only be found in one place, the planet Arrakis, also known as Dune. The Empire only allows one house to control Dune at a time, and that house gets rich as shit. And with those riches come enemies. Mo money, mo problems. The plot of Dune is incredibly complex, and that's a very, very broad simplification. But I'll try and break it down into some bullet points for you. Collect resources, build armies, fight wars. Bloodthirsty space lords, an iron-fisted galactic empire, space travel that bends time itself, it's everything a classic science fiction novel should be. But Dune was also the first ecologically minded science fiction novel. The central conceit is that humanity's entire existence hinges upon the proper stewardship of Dune. Without the spice on Dune, there is no space travel, and without space travel, the Empire itself crumbles. Also, no one gets the space trip on that sweet, spicy spice.
Traveling without moving. Now I truly control the world.
Dune is amazing. The world is so complex and fully realized that it can't be contained into just a book. It's perfect for adaptation into movies, music, comic books, even video games. Let's look at the first attempt at adaptation, the Dune film. Within 5 years of the book's release, work began on adapting the story to film. However, it took nearly 2 decades and 3 separate directors, Alejandro Jodorowsky first, Ridley Scott second, and finally David Lynch, for the film to come to life. That's 20 years to make one movie. And when it was finished, the world was ready to experience David Lynch's unique vision of Dune. And the world said,
"It stinks."
Reviews were terrible and the box office sales were even worse. I mean, what went wrong? Was it because of Sting? Whoa, put on the red light. Sting was looking good. It was not because of Sting. It was more likely because if you hadn't read the book, the film made basically no sense. Even though the movie was a colossal failure, Virgin Interactive decided they were going to make a video game out of Dune. And so they tasked Westwood Studios with creating that adaptation. And thus was born Dune II.
Wait, hold up. They made a game based off the second Dune book?
No, actually the second book's called something entirely different.
What, so were they developing 2 Dune games at the same time, and when one came out before the other one, they were just like, whatever, call it Dune 2?
Wow, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Did you read the script?
Oh, no. I just show up to shoot stuff.
Okay, so the situation was such that Virgin was developing 2 Dune games. They canceled one, kept going with the Westwood one, but right before Westwood was finished developing their game, the other game was, uncanceled. And then that one came out first and became Dune 1. But Dune 2 was the seminal real-time strategy game. It established the mechanics which would form the bedrock of the genre. Basically, the way an RTS works is collect resources, build armies, fight wars. Huh, it's the same thing. Would you look at that? Hold on, watch this. Still the same. Wow, it's great. Here's what Dune 2 gave to the RTS genre. A world map where you can choose your next mission, resource gathering, being able to build your own base and units, a technology tree, units that can be deployed as buildings, different sides and factions represented by the various houses, and also unique units and super weapons for those factions, and a context-sensitive mouse cursor, although that was only in the Sega Master Drive version. That's pretty much the entirety of the RTS mechanics. If you take those away, the game's not an RTS anymore. There are some games that came out before Dune 2 that are considered RTSs, but without the aforementioned mechanics, it's a bit of a stretch. Games like Stonkers, Command HQ, and The Ancient Art of War, but these are more akin to a round of speed chess than an RTS. You're given your pieces, you're expected to outwit your opponent on the field of battle, but the hallmarks that define a modern RTS are almost entirely absent. There is one precursor to Dune 2 that is often bandied about as the beginning of the genre. It's called Herzog Zwei. This 1989 title for the Sega Genesis has a lot of mechanics we expect from an RTS. It has unit building and micromanagement of an army in real time, but the gameplay feels a little bit more like a MOBA game than your classic real-time strategy game. You control a hero unit, and it's through this unit that you execute commands. Dune 2 owes a ton to Herzog Zwei, and it has been cited as a major inspiration by the Dune 2 developers.
Like the Pixies.
I get it, but explain it to these guys.
So the Pixies are super influential for alternative rock, but when they started, they were pretty obscure, because of not a lot of MTV time.
Then Nirvana happened. Cobain heard the Pixies' album Surfer Rosa, and his life was changed. Nirvana took that sound and hit the mainstream, which changed the course of rock music forever, basically. But Cobain has claimed that
I was trying to write the ultimate pop song. I was basically trying to rip off the Pixies. I have to admit it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I was gonna say Hydrox and Oreos, but your analogy stands.
Yeah, Hydrox are a ripoff of Oreos.
No, Hydrox came first.
Oh, so Oreo took what Hydrox started and improved upon it. Want to know why they'd never made double stuffed Hydrox?
Why?
Because double stuffed Hydrox tastes like double stuffed crap.
Herzog Zwei,
like the Pixies,
like Hydrox, ostensibly started the fire that was the RTS genre. But Dune 2,
like Nirvana,
like Oreos, was the fuel that spread the blaze. In a 1998 essay by Virgin Interactive Vice President Stephen Clark Wilson, titled The Origin of Real-Time Strategy Games on the PC, Clark Wilson makes a surprisingly similar claim to Cobain.
Is it possible that yours truly, by suggesting that West would knock off the gameplay in Herzog Zwei, created a revolution in computer gaming that is still rolling on today? Well, who knows? Not me.
Who knows? Not me. Like that song Kurt Cobain wrote. You're really tying this whole thing together, man. It's awesome.
David Bowie wrote that song.
What?
So yeah, to say Dune 2 was the first game where you strategically fought someone in real time isn't entirely true, but it's the standard by which all future games were made. Herzog Zwei alley-ooped, Dune 2 dunked the ball.
Alley-oop for Jordan!
The thing that interests me the most is the mechanic of spice collection. Resource gathering could be considered the crux of any RTS genre. The rest of the gameplay elements sort of arise out of it. Remember the RTS order of events. Collect resources, build armies, fight wars. Without the former, you can't achieve the latter. And that brings us right back to Dune. The novel is entirely reliant on the collection of spice, both the mechanics of the world and the plot. No spice, no galactic empire, and spoilers, no sequence of events that leads to Paul Atreides becoming a borderline god. And it's this central book conceit that inspired Dune 2, and thus the entirety of the RTS genre. Let's get it straight from the VP of Virgin, Clark Wilson.
I thought, from a gaming point of view, the real stress was the battle to control the spice, and that a resource strategy game would be good.
The most important part of that is resource strategy game. Look at the games that predate Dune 2. You can't use that term to describe them. I guess you have to manage resources, but if you want to get that granular, I guess you could consider not wasting your lives in Super Mario Bros. As resource management. Dune 2 is distinctly about collecting a resource, spice. The first mission in the game is entirely about collecting spice. Once you collect the required amount, the mission ends.
Your mission is complete.
The rest of the game is about strategically using spice collection to defeat your opposition, and no game had done that previously. Could somebody else have come up with the idea of an RTS based around resource collecting? Sure. It's impossible for me to say that nobody would have come up with this idea without reading the novel. But this is how it happened, and as such, the novel Dune was the primary influence for Dune 2, and Dune 2 led directly to Westwood's Command & Conquer, which alongside Warcraft 1 and 2, are most likely the titles that helped the RTS genre break into mainstream popularity. And speaking of Warcraft, it's not far-fetched to imagine how directly Westwood and Dune 2 influenced their efforts. Clark Wilson had this to say.
It turns out that Blizzard used to be a company called Quicksilver that did lots of work for Interplay. Brian Fargo really liked working with them, so we called them up to see if there was something we could do together. Nothing clicked, and that was that. But do you suppose that these Quicksilver guys started playing Dune 2? Maybe Brian got him hooked on it. Is it possible that the Warcraft/StarCraft series of games came from the same common root?
I think it's more than possible. I think it's highly probable. And through that influence, Warcraft evolved into its third iteration, Reign of Chaos, which, with its hero-based gameplay, seems to revisit ground first tread by Herzog Zwei. A Warcraft 3 mod called Defense of the Ancients ended up becoming arguably more popular than Warcraft 3 itself. In fact, it created an entire new genre of games called MOBAs, or Multiplayer Online Battle Arena games. You may have heard of them. They're the backbone of esports. Defense of the Ancients, or Dota, was the biggest inspiration of League of Legends, a game played in packed arenas around the world. Not like football pack, but like definitely basketball pack. Give it some time, it'll get there. Warcraft 3 would be the last real-time strategy game in that franchise. Blizzard transitioned Warcraft into World of Warcraft, creating the most popular massively multiplayer online game to date. Think about it. No Dune 2, no Warcraft, no World of Warcraft, no Leroy Jenkins. Is that a world you want to live in? Leroy! Okay, that's not a good reason for any of this. But the seed or germ of thought that became Dune 2 started with the ecologically minded, resource management-based novel Dune. I think sometimes it's easy for us to view the roots of video games as being only influenced by other video games. We say a game plays like Zelda, or the level progression reminds us of a Metroidvania. That's great, it helps us easily categorize experiences. It's a shorthand for discussion. But it seems like a lot of times we don't discuss the bigger pop cultural influences on video games. At least not at first, that stuff usually comes years later. For instance, at this point we know that Metroid's aesthetic was greatly influenced by Ridley Scott's film Alien. Metal Gear Solid's story, setting, and characters were based on action films like Die Hard, Escape from New York, and a ton of others. Look, I'm not saying the way we talk about games is bad. I just think the discussion isn't as complete without looking through a wider cultural spectrum. Nothing exists in a vacuum. I think that it's very likely Dune influenced a lot of the games that we love today. I also think that there's probably a lot of other works of art out there that we'd never expect that have also influenced video games. Dune is about interconnectedness. The planet Arrakis is essential to the existence of an entire galaxy. The novel inspired a key mechanic in a game that has defined a genre. There's probably a ton of cases like this, and since we're the first generation to have grown up with games, I guess we get to be the ones to sort it all out. And that's awesome. See you guys soon.